have been banging on for a long time, and I'm not alone in this, about how China gets all up in your infrastructure, they spy, they nick your ideas, and they set things up so they can meddle with them in the future. Oh no, that's xenophobic. But China makes things so cheaply. How are we going to save the planet unless China were the ones pumping all the CO2 into the air using coal-fired power stations to make wind farms and solar panels? Lovely China. No, not so lovely China. I mean, incredible intervention this by Sir Richard Dearlove, who was the former head of MI6, who has said that using Chinese technology in the UK's wind farms, solar panels, electric cars and other green energy infrastructure is a threat to national security. He said it's so crazy, the whole policy is completely mad. Problem is, you've got ideological Ed Miliband pursuing net zero without a thought for any impact on national security. Now, Dearlove has previously warned against relying on China for Britain's energy infrastructure. And you wonder, don't you? You wonder whether any of these security briefings pass the Prime Minister's desk. Does he just ignore them? Is he that much of a zealot like Mad Ed about climate change? And he's just like, yeah, well, never mind if China can turn it all off. I mean, it's my big question of the day. Is Starmer actually working for the Chinese Communist Party? Well, let's speak to Ross Clark, who's a brilliant columnist at The Sun, and he's the author of Not Zero, How an Irrational Target Will Impoverish You and Help China and Won't Even Save the Planet. What a great title for a book. Welcome back to the show, Ross. I mean...
Good afternoon.
America has found out, they've looked at their own solar panels from China and found that there are these so-called kill switches, which could be essentially overridden from abroad to turn them off, which could create massive fluctuations in the energy system, which could then lead to big blackouts, the style of which Spain just suffered. So why on earth are we pushing ahead with this stuff if it's a direct threat to national security?
Yes, well, I mean, of course, Ed Miliband tries to sell his policy of creating an electricity grid based mostly on wind and solar by telling us it's going to boost national security. He said it's going to reduce our dependency on what he calls fossil fuel dictators, who he claims set the oil and gas prices. Well, it's not quite like that at all, actually. In fact, the biggest gas supplier in the world is the US, and the prices are set locally. But that's his claim. But, you know, he's totally ignoring the other side of things, which Sir Richard Dearlove, you know, has brought to light today, that, you know, relying on Chinese-made kit, Chinese-made solar panels, wind turbines, other kit for the grid is itself a serious threat to national security. And the discovery of these kill switches by the US National Security Agency last week in Chinese-made solar panels just shows the potential, and I call it potential. I didn't say that China's necessarily going to chuck a switch and remove much of our power from the grid, throw us into blackouts, but clearly the potential is there. And you know, if you're putting kill switches in kit, you've got to think, well, you know, there's a possibility we might actually want to use these things. And you know, we sort of saw the other week, you know, what devastation can happen in Spain when the power grid went up. I mean, there's no evidence there, by the way, there was any sort of foreign actors involved. It was just a cock-up. But, you know, clearly the potential, you try and electrify everything, make everything dependent on electronics and, you know, make electricity our main source of energy. And you are opening up the country to the potential to be disrupted by bad actors abroad. And that is an issue which the government has just simply not got on top of. It's just totally ignoring it in its rush to hit these net zero targets.
Well, it's absolutely mad. And not just that, you've got to question how safe some of this stuff is, right? Because pregnant women had to be evacuated from a hospital in Bristol after a solar panel fire broke out. I mean, can these things just sort of spontaneously combust?
Well, yes, I understand that fire has been blamed on a fault in the solar panels. It's not the first time they've burst into flames. We've had wind turbines burst into flames as well, and batteries, a large scale electric battery storage is a serious problem, a serious fire risk. You get something called thermal runaway, where excessive heat turns into fire, and that breeds off itself without actually requiring external supply of oxygen. That's what makes these electrical fires, battery fires, just so dangerous, because it's difficult to put them out by the traditional means of smothering them with water, foam, or whatever. It has to be said, obviously, of course, that traditional sources of energy, petrol, gas, and so on, also have severe fire risks, and that every year we lose a few people to gas explosions, and petrol cars, of course, burst into flames when they're crash, or sometimes not when they crash. So, I mean, all sources of energy have their risks, but clearly what's happened there in Bristol today does, open up the reality of the risk, and that is going to have to be managed, and perhaps in a better way than it has been today.
Sticking solar panels on hospitals is the only thing that Ed Miliband's managed to do with his so-called GB Energy, in which about £8 billion, was it £8 billion or more, was pumped into that thing. And all they've managed to do so far is say, yeah, we're going to put some solar panels on hospitals. Then look what happens. It makes a mockery. It really does. You must be delighted, therefore, to hear that Donald Trump has put on Truth Social a direct intervention saying to Sir Keir Starmer, get that gas and oil out of the North Sea. Your energy prices are going to go way down. Now, thankfully, Ofgem have lowered the energy price cap today. I'm sure the Labour Party will be indulging a bit of braggadocio about that one, even though it's got naff all to do with anything they've done. But the fact of the matter is, actually, we've got the highest energy prices in the world. It's a drain on the entire economy. And Donald Trump's right, isn't he? We have a very clear solution to all of this.
Yeah, I'm not always the greatest fan of Donald Trump, but one of his great attributes is he tells the truth. He tells things how it was. And, people will sneer at him. People in the Green movement will sneer at him for saying what he's done, what he said today. But he's right that Britain's energy policy works by depriving ourselves of cheaper forms of energy. And unsurprisingly, that has resulted in Britain having the highest domestic and industrial electricity prices in the world, or of any member of the International Energy Agency. That's the UK government's own figures tell us that. And still Ed Miliband, goes around saying, oh, it's our reliance on gas which is causing us, these high electricity prices. No, it's how we're using gas, because we're using gas as a short-term backup for intermittent wind and solar. That's what makes gas power so expensive here. Look at the US. They generate a high proportion of their electricity from gas than we do in Britain, and yet their electricity prices for industrial users in particular are about a quarter of what they are here. It is a very, very severe difference. We are pursuing an extremely expensive energy policy as a result of these net zero targets. And Ed Miliband is denying it, the Green movement is denying it, but I'm afraid it is becoming more and more obvious by the day that green policies are driving up energy prices in Britain.
Yeah, and it's not even going to move the needle on carbon emissions anyway. Ross Clark, thank you ever so much. The brilliant as ever Ross Clark there. This is one of the best titles of a book I've ever heard. Not Zero, How an Irrational Target Will Impoverish You, Help China and Won't Even Save the Planet. I wonder what that book's about.